Today on Rappler.
Sobra na! Abolish pork na!
The sequel to Million People March is held in Makati. Laid-off PAL employees ask for Pope Francis's help. And former U.S. officials say China should play by the rules in territorial disputes. Hello, I'm Maria Ressa. Welcome to Rappler, your social news network. Following the success of the #Million People March in Luneta last August, groups against the pork barrel hold another protest in Makati City. The groups want concrete calls for action and specific policy recommendations. Paterno Esmaquel reports.
For the first time, hundreds of protesters slammed the president right in front of his father's monument in Makati.
Sobra na! Abolish pork na!
Protesters challenged the president to scrap his pork barrel, alleging Aquino's discretionary funds were misused. They also challenged lawmakers to let go of their pork. 59-year-old Manolo Pascual came all the way from Bulacan. He isn't an activist, but makes it a point to come here. He feels betrayed by the president he elected.
Kaya nagpapasalamat ho ako na dito ginawa. Bakit? Dahil andun niya ang tatay niya eh. Para baka sakaling magising ang mata niya, na teka muna, nalilis na nga yata ako ng landas. Lumiliko na nga yata yung campaign slogan kong tuwid na daan.
Comedian May Paner, who won a change on social media, says the venue reminds the president of his father's legacy. She says it's also a wake-up call for the middle class in the country's financial capital.
I think napaka magandang lugar ng Makati sapagkat ito ang sentro ng negosyo. Kaya naisip namin na gawin dito para sabihin natin sa mga tao ng Makati, the business sector most specifically, na kasi sila yung medyo pinaka-iffy about the pork barrel system. Siguro happy sila, aywan ko kung takot sila, masyado silang takot sa presidente o masyadong sariling interest lang nilang iniisip nila.
Organizers say they want specific policies to address patronage politics, the root of fund misuse. Protesters end the rally with a symbol of vigilance against corruption. This is the monument of the president's father, the martyred Senator Benigno Aquino Jr. It evokes memories of heroism. For protesters, it's also a warning for the president not to stain his father's legacy. Paterno Esmaquel, Rappler, Manila.
The maid, whom alleged pork barrel queen Janet Lim Napoles set up for qualified theft, was released from Makati City Jail Friday. Napoles allegedly planted evidence last February against Dominga Cadelina, Napoles' maid of 10 years. Napoles, who's detained in Laguna for serious illegal detention charges, surrendered to the president on August 28. She briefly joined Cadelina at the Makati City Jail before being transferred. The government's Disbursement Acceleration Program, or DAP, may be stopped eventually, but the palace says it has nothing to do with the recent controversy questioning its constitutionality. Deputy Presidential Spokesperson Abigail Valtes says the releases under the program decreased over the years because public spending picked up. The Budget Department says a total of 137.3 billion pesos is released under DAP. The Aquino administration explains details of DAP after senators questioned its constitutionality, with critics calling it a bribe for the conviction of former Chief Justice Renato Corona. Pope Francis personally receives a letter from former employees of Philippine Airlines, or PAL, caught in a 2-year labor dispute. Father Edwin Garrigues of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines delivers the letter to the Pope in Vatican City. In their letter, PAL Employees Association President Jerry Rivera requests help to, quote, restore justice to the working people. Rivera says the Pope's intercession in the case may, quote, prove decisive in a settlement fair to the workers. Up to 2,600 PAL employees lost their jobs in September 2011 after PAL decided to outsource its in-flight services. Union members refused to accept severance packages and picketed outside PAL's office in Pasay City. In turn, PAL filed criminal charges against PLAYA members for paralyzing its operations in late 2011. In the early months of his papacy, the Pope has broken protocols and has shown a strong reformist drive, but he shied away from taking specific positions on local political or labor issues. Police raid the home of Moro National Liberation Front founder Nur Miswari, seizing documents and other items. Chief Inspector Ariel Huesca says officers used explosives to enter the locked residential compound. Police asked prosecutors to bring charges against Miswari and his followers, who clashed with government forces in Zamboanga last month in a standoff that left more than 200 people dead. Miswari is accused of sending his followers to block a proposed peace deal between the government and a rival Muslim rebel group. The 20-day standoff between government troops and members of the Moro National Liberation Front could have turned out differently. A lot of things happened on September 12, day 4 of the standoff, that shaped the direction of government's response to the crisis. Members of the Crisis Management Committee were actively negotiating with MNLF fighters to peacefully end the conflict, but no one coordinated these efforts. On September 13th, inside the combat zone in Santa Catalina, priest Father Michael Ufana, a hostage of Miswari's top commander Javier Malik, offered to bring Malik's demands to the government to stop the fighting. Meanwhile, barangay councilor and radio reporter Chodver Arquisa was also waiting for calls from a Commander Ismael from the MNLF so they could complete the surrender of about 80 MNLF fighters and the release of their 38 hostages in adjacent barangay Santa Barbara. Arquisa said the commander's sole demand was that he report the surrender live on radio. He reported over Radio Mindanao Network the possible release of hostages. The afternoon of September 12, Arquisa went to Santa Barbara to escort the hostages out of the battle zone, but he was blocked by government troops. That night, Rappler reported that about 80 MNLF fighters from the Yakan tribe of Basilan surrendered to police troops in Santa Barbara. This was immediately denied by Interior Secretary Roxas and by President Benigno Aquino the following day. The denial surprised people involved in the surrender, including Arquisa. While Arquisa was at the West Mincom Lounge that night, security officials talked about how difficult it was to process surrenderies in the evening. On Friday afternoon, the silence was cut by heavy firing. By then, both Ufana and Arquisa knew they failed. Towards the end of the crisis, the Philippine National Police revealed attempts by MNLF fighters to surrender. A September 22 press release read, "Repeated attempts by the Yakan group to contact the government and state their opposition to Malik's action failed." Looking back, Arquisa said much of the destruction in Zamboanga City could have been avoided. The most junior justice in the Sandigan Bayan is appointed the new head of the anti-graft court. Sandigan Bayan Justice Amparo Cabutahe Tang will be replacing Francisco Villaruz, who retired as presiding justice on June 8. She wins over 4 other nominees to the position, including 2 senior justices. A former Assistant Solicitor General, Cabutahe Tang, filed the pleading opposing the maligned plea bargain deal between the Sandigan Bayan and former military comptroller Major General Carlos Garcia. She was appointed to the anti-graft court in June 2012. Water concessionaire Maynilad files a dispute notice before the International Chamber of Commerce after the water regulator decided to cut rates in the metro. Maynilad is the West Zone concessionaire of the privatized water services in the capital, while Manila Water Company Incorporated is the East Zone concessionaire. Manila Water also earlier sued water regulator MWSS before the ICC. In September, MWSS says the average basic charge of Manila Water will go down by 1.45 pesos per cubic meter, while Maynilad's rates will go down by 1.29 pesos. US-based group Freedom House says the Philippines has the freest internet in Southeast Asia, but says the controversial anti-cybercrime law marred its excellent record. In a report, the group says the country's, quote, freedom on the net score dropped from 23 last year to 25 because of the law. The report says the law allows authorities to block online content without a warrant, facilitate government surveillance, and punish online libel with up to 12 years imprisonment. The Supreme Court issued a temporary restraining order on the implementation of the law. 15 petitions were filed against it. Freedom House credits civil society activism for helping suspend the law's implementation, but says the law's status going forward is unclear. Two former U.S. officials say China has to learn to play by the rules and the Philippines must keep South China Sea disputes from escalating. The Philippines and China are engaged in a territorial dispute over parts of the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea. Speaking at the sidelines of a maritime security forum in Manila, former U.S. Defense Undersecretary Walter Slocum says no one wants to see a confrontation over China over territory. He says, quote, "We must find a way to defend our interests and our sovereignty." Slocum adds, "There's a real danger of an incident blowing up and becoming the source of a much bigger conflict." Former U.S. Forces Commander in the Pacific Dennis Blair adds, quote, "We have to convince China that as it involves the rest of the region and the world in solving its problems, it has to play by the rules." Slocum says the Philippines should also shore up its own maritime defense, aside from just relying on the U.S. to back it up. On the third day of the U.S. shutdown, new talks over a broad budget deal or offer fresh hopes for ending the fiscal shutdown. The New York Times reports House Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan initiates conversations with senior House Republicans on a broad deficit reduction deal. Ryan's deal must happen quickly to provide a framework that Speaker John Boehner can use to win over enough Republicans to reopen the government. New York Times also reports Boehner privately told Republican lawmakers that he would use a combination of Republican and Democratic votes to increase the federal debt limit if necessary. Well, let's now look at Rappler's Wrap for today, a list of the 10 most important events around the world you shouldn't miss. At number 4, Twitter unveils its highly anticipated stock offering with the popular service seeking to raise up to $1 billion on Wall Street. The IPO is expected to be the most sought after since Facebook in May 2012. Private share transactions value the company at around $10 billion. The California company also publishes financial data revealing it has 218 million active users as of June 30th. The company, though, has been losing money since 2010. In 2012, it reported a $79.4 million revenue with a $79.4 million with revenues of $317 million. At number 6, U.S. police shot and killed a woman after a high-speed chase from the White House to the Capitol building. Media footage shows the car speeding off after striking a barrier at the outer perimeter of White House security. The woman was driving with a 1-year-old child in her black sedan. The child is now under protective custody. The chief of the Capitol Police says there's no information to suggest a terrorist motive for the isolated incident. It comes less than 3 weeks since a gunman opened fire at the Navy Yard. And at number 8, Indonesian investigators arrest the Constitutional Court's top judge for allegedly accepting a bribe in a case linked to a disputed election. Akil Mokhtar was arrested after a businessman and a lawmaker allegedly handed him around 3 billion rupiah or more than $250,000. The Corruption Eradication Commission says the bribery is linked to a disputed election in Gunung Mas district on Borneo Island on September 4. For the full top 10, visit Rappler.com's The Wrap. Every story on Rappler has a mood meter which gives you 8 emotions to choose from. Click how you feel and your vote comes down to the mood navigator in the middle of the front page. That crowdsources the mood of the day. It also gives you the top 10 stories that have affected our readers the most emotionally. These 10 stories have gotten the most number of votes on their mood meters. If we take a look today, this is yesterday's story, GMA named in Malampaya plunder complaint. We've seen this change moods twice today from amused to 51% angry. This continues to stay on the mood navigator. The Boss and Gigi Reyes about former Senate President Juan Ponce Enrile and Gigi Reyes, his former chief of staff, 31% angry, 27% amused. But if you take a look here, the story that's gotten the most number of votes is a business story. Philippines wins investment grade from Moody's, 85% happy, 13% inspired. That green, coupled with the green from other stories, show you that the mood of the day is happy. Well, that is Rappler's Newscast for today, Friday, October 4th, 2013. Visit Rappler.com and watch our newscast Monday to Friday. Tell us how you feel on our mood meter and help us crowdsource the mood of the day. I'm Maria Ressa. As we say at Rappler, tomorrow begins today.